There was a heavy rain for a few days here in Martinsville, Virginia. The heavy rain did not disturb the soil here, and we're going to talk about some of the key design features that makes this such a unique and valuable system. I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. So in previous videos I showed you where we flail mowed the cover crops, and then I terminate the cover crops with shallow tillage. You can see the biomass on the surface, and then of course there's a little bit of tilled lines here. These beds are level with this back paths on contour. And what that does when you get a heavy rain is it slows and soaks down the water. So what we can see in the soil profile is the darker soil towards the back over here, where there's still quite a bit of moisture. And then the soil itself over here is a little bit drier, but under that soil, and let me show you over on this side, same profile, a little moist in the back, dry up front. It's actually only dry on the surface. So what we're gonna do, just kind of move a little bit of the soil aside, and you can see the moisture right below the soil. And so of course the cover crop's terminated. You can see how that's drying out. There's a little bit of residual in the surface, but we're not burying the crop residue. We simply chopped it up and we're leaving it on the surface of the soil with shallow tillage. Now you can see here where we have a little bit different soil profile. You got the moisture in the back. You've got the regular flatbed here, and then over here you can see a lot more organic material in that soil, and that's the result of mounding in manures and just what was here, you know, getting just turned over just a little bit. But again, we're not turning the soil over to make it powdery, to make it you know, all uniform in size. We want that crumble in the soil so that when we get a heavy rain, the organic material on the top will bust up that rain, soak it up, spread it out, and then the soil itself is not so soft that it runs off. So what you'll notice is none of these beds have water running off. They don't have any pools of water anywhere. They have simply slowed and spread out the water. Now, again, we have the function of the cover crops still on the bunds. These bumps here are called bunds. Not buns like on the backside of your body, but bund, like the edge of the terrace. Those edges still have grasses on them, which will absorb the excess moisture and convert it into carbonous material, which is additional biomass for the beds. So you can see on this one, the flail mower creates this kind of material, okay? And then that kind of material is simply incorporated into the tops of the bed as kind of a mulch or kind of a straw. And now this bed could probably be tilled a little bit better. I did notice a couple spots where I didn't terminate the cover crop completely, kind of right here in the middle. But ultimately, these beds are not as mature as the beds in the past. So these beds have only been this way for a season or so. But again, we have different characteristics of the land and different approaches to address those characteristics. This one's nice and level, look at that. And this one's sloped away a little bit, but again, we have the vegetable strip, or the vegetative strip, that is kind of the absorption layer. So if there was any running of soil, so if the soil liquefied from the rain, it's not running out here onto the drive or onto the access point. We're keeping the soil and its nutrients on the bed itself so that we can use those nutrients to grow our plants. Now, what's interesting to see is all these trees have perked up. Those are nitrogen fixing trees. And then we also have some persimmons in here. And what's going to be our food forest area is starting to perk up a little bit. But again, we don't use tillage everywhere. Like for example, I didn't till down the bottom here. All we did is cut the grass, flail the grass. And then we left this wheat or winter rye to finish off, to mature, so we can cut that and run it through the thresher. So pay attention for that video. And you can also see our bulbed flowers are coming up. Now, I mentioned the bulb flowers before and the difference in management of the bulb flowers, how we flail mow the bulb flowers at a high height when they're dead in the winter. The reason we're doing that is we wanted these bulbs to stay in the ground for 2 years before we dig them up and then separate the bulbs to increase the number of flowers. When we dig up the bulbs, we may till to put the bulbs back in, but we don't have enough organic matter down there. So we're probably going to mulch everything out for a couple seasons until we get those bulbs nice and multiplied and then we're able to remove them. Most of the time, cut flowers are fresh bulbs every year, but we're doing a regenerative method, kind of a natural farming method, where we're just going to keep cultivating these bulbs in place, cutting off the flowers when we have them, but the growing space itself has minimal management. We're primarily going to mulch it, primarily going to lay cover crop in it, and then when we do remove bulbs to separate the bulbs, it's every 2 or 3 years. That's completely different than what we've got going on up here, which is more of a market garden that is going to be cultivated, not necessarily every year. The beds up top are mature enough that we can simply mulch those beds and then plant in the mulch. But down here, they will need some light, shallow tillage every so often. You can see in this area here, the tiller really didn't take care of some of that middle section there. So that was kind of rough. I could hit that again with the tiller. I've got another section on the other side that we're going to clean up with wider terraces and a little bit cleaner terraces. I'll probably hit this with the tiller again. But again, we're only tilling at about 1 inch. We're just terminating the cover crop. That's all we're doing. We're maintaining soil structure. And in this case down here, we're trying to spread the beds out a little bit more to make them a bit more level, because likely we'll come through here with one of those little rolling seeders to seed out corn or other types of vegetables kind of in bulk. Again, this is permaculture combined with a couple other methods in order to demonstrate the different growing methods. And you can see up there the trails. When we have heavy winds, the soil doesn't get blown away. We have heavy winds, we're not evaporating so much moisture off the soil. The organic material is building up. You can see another area here where there was cow manure. We got some great piles of chicken manure, cow manure, rabbit manure, all from on the farm, building nutrients and cycling them through holistic ways that keep those nutrients on the property. We don't want the stuff to wash down the hill and wash down and off the property. We want to use large vegetative strips, and in fact, these cover crops that are going to grow out to maturity so that we can get the seeds are technically vegetative strips. And I mowed some strips between them so that we can have corn growing between the different cover crops of alfalfa and grains and a little bit of everything else. So you can see these strips. I'll probably come back out and till these strips out so we can put some corn strips in here. But the different, kind of think about silvopasture. The different levels of what's growing out here, the different seasons and maturities is what's going to keep our soil covered and protected. And we're not removing the crop residue. We're not burning the crop residue. In fact, we're chopping that crop residue up and reintroducing it to the soil as a mulch. So you can see the mulch here. And you can also see some chips from the rabbit manure we spread. We're not putting that under the soil. We're putting that on the surface, and we're using appropriate tillage to just simply terminate the crop. Again, I keep stressing that because when a lot of folks who are used to conventional gardening see something like this, they want to run a tiller over it and make sure that and make the soil nice and crispy, nice and flaky and stuff. But we don't want that. We want natural aeration under the soil with the use of strong microbiology, worms, and also the plant roots. So allowing these crops to grow taller means the roots go deeper. And we want to basically have minimal inputs. So we don't want to have to fertilize. If we till under the cover crop, and let's say it's about 6 inches under the ground, it's just going to ferment under the ground. It's not going to deliver the value that we want because it's without oxygen. You need your green crops on the surface to have oxygen interaction so that the right types of microbes grow, and those right types of microbes will break down that material into nutrients readily available for your plants. So again, it's one garden area, but there's like 4 or 5 different management methods depending on the plants in it. You can see over here, these are cut flowers, and the alfalfa is kicking up around the cut flowers. We didn't plant that alfalfa. That's left over from the alfalfa that was there before. We simply mowed. Alfalfa is nitrogen fixing. It feeds the bulbed flowers. We're more likely to get good, healthy bulbs that are going to multiply. And again, it's tillage with a long time frame in between. These beds might get tilled once a year, again, just to terminate the cover crop. But because your corn and squash and stuff is more of a summer crop in the spring right now, which is still April, we're just going to leave them idle. We'll let the cover grow back a little bit because we don't need the beds right now. But again, these vegetable beds for the veggies that are coming out, we've got lettuces and starts, we've got onions, we've got a lot of things that can start coming out now. So these beds have to get tilled now. And you can see I didn't till all the way through here. This whole bottom edge could get cleaned up and tilled for corn or whatever we're going to run out. We are running more vegetable crops this year. Actually, we could probably do potatoes through there. I like to do potatoes on high ground that needs to be leveled out anyway. That way, when we dig up the potatoes, we're doing our earth moving at the same time of potato harvesting. Does this all make sense to you? Is this something you can see yourself doing? If so, then start your garden now. It doesn't really matter how you start, as long as you understand the key things. You want to slow and spread the water. So how you design your rows, you want them more level on terrace. You want them contour paths. You want to make sure that you're keeping nutrients on the property by, again, managing the water. Then when you till or how you till is based on function. You might do a deep tillage up front just to break up the soil and get you started. But as you add organic material to the soil, then you have less and less tillage because, again, the organic matter is going to keep your soil from being too compacted. Again, we started with Virginia clay, so it had to be ripped, it had to be tilled, but not like that every year. And then you want to have ample use of cover crops, because your cover crops are going to be how you're getting additional organic material, how you're creating mulch on site, and how ultimately you're feeding the soil with atmospheric nitrogen. You're bringing up minerals deep down in the ground from the roots, pulling up minerals, and ultimately you're framing your garden to tie back together with how we're managing water. It is not time productive to come out here and water all these things every day. We rely on the rain to do this, and that's why the design facilitates that. Again, I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. If you've got any questions about what we've covered today, please go below, click the link, join the newsletter, or visit www.prosperityhomestead.org. Go to the contact page and ask your questions. I would love to hear from you. I really like answering folks' questions. And then if you've got pictures of your gardens and stuff, we're thinking about doing some contests for community gardens. So if you've got a community garden in your area, we love your tips and tricks, and we'd like to share those, because a lot of times when people see a garden this large, they're worried about the amount of work it takes. But ultimately, if you do this in a community, and there's 4 or 5 people out here working on this particular project, it goes a lot easier. Many hands make light work. And so if you've got a community garden, or you want to start a community garden, you're in the right place. Simply contact us with your questions. Thanks for watching. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead, where we help small farms, homesteads, and estates get maximum value from their land and put their land into a ecologically sound, productive state.